It's done. We sold it all. The house, the cabin, even your car. You don't need them anymore. I stood in the kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence after Mark's words. On the screen an electronic contract glowed, June 14, 2024, amount, $178,000, signature, Mark Holloway. The paper felt real enough in that bright rectangle, and yet I could not remember ever signing anything. His voice was flat, careful, the same tone he used when settling a bill. We handled everything, Mom. You don't have to worry. He said it like a kindness. I watched the light from the window catch the silver rim of my teacup, and the photograph of Henry by the lake on the shelf seemed to tilt away. How could they do this to me? I said into the phone, though I knew the question better than the answer. My hand trembled just enough to make the tea ripple. If you want to hear my full story, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and stay until the end. Because I will tell you everything they did behind my back, how they sold my memories for money, and how I found a way to protect what was truly mine. My name is Margaret Holloway. I am 67 years old. For more than 3 decades I taught literature at a public high school. I used to stand in front of a chalkboard and read aloud lines from Great Expectations or Pride and Prejudice, believing that even the most distracted teenager might recognize something of their own life in those pages. When I retired, I thought my world would be quieter, perhaps smaller, but safe. Henry, my husband, was an engineer. Together we built what I believed was a solid life. A 3-bedroom house with a front porch in Pennsylvania, a small cabin by Lakeview where the pines leaned over the water, and a second-hand car that Henry used to polish every Sunday. He died 10 years ago, a sudden heart attack on a bright September morning. Since then I have carried both grief and responsibility alone. We had 2 children, Mark, our son, and Emily, our daughter. Emily moved to Ohio with her husband and their little girl, Kate. She calls every week, sometimes just to ask what I had for dinner. Mark, on the other hand, lived only a half-hour away, yet months could pass before he appeared. When he did, it was usually with a new request, money for a loan payment, or advice on some scheme that Sheryl, his wife, had convinced him was the future. I wanted to believe I was helping them find stability. That is what mothers do. But slowly, I began to feel less like a mother and more like a ledger they were balancing. The first crack appeared 2 years ago on Mother's Day. Mark arrived with a bouquet of tulips and a card signed only with Sheryl's handwriting. Over coffee, he leaned forward and said softly, "Mom, you're not so good with numbers anymore. Sheryl and I will always help." At the time, I smiled. I thought it was concern, maybe even love. I had been paying bills late, forgetting a due date here and there. But later, when I reread the card alone, I realized there was not a single word from him inside, only hers. It sat heavy in my drawer for weeks. After that, their tone began to change in small ways. They started speaking louder when addressing me, as if I were half-deaf. "Do you understand, Mom?" Sheryl would say, articulating each word like a teacher in front of a stubborn child. They began checking receipts. One afternoon, Mark held up a slip from the bookstore. "Why spend $120 on books when everything is free online?" His voice carried the same irritation as when he scolded his children. I remember placing my hands on the kitchen table, steadying myself, and replying, "Because I like the smell of paper." He shook his head and left the receipt on the counter like evidence. The invasion became physical, too. Once, I walked into my bedroom and found Sheryl kneeling at my drawer, rifling through the contents. My scarves, my letters from Henry, even the insurance folder I kept neatly tied with a rubber band. She looked up without guilt. "I'm just looking for your papers," she said. "So you don't lose them." I felt something cold then. A small, sharp fracture. But I told myself not to make a scene. Families have tensions, daughters-in-law can be protective. I closed the drawer gently and pretended not to notice the envelope out of place. The pattern continued. When I hesitated before paying a large bill, Mark offered to take care of it. He asked for my online banking password so he could streamline the process. I refused, lightly, with a joke about being old-fashioned. His jaw tightened. At gatherings, they spoke over me. If I shared a memory of Henry fixing the cabin roof in the summer heat, Sheryl would interrupt with, "Yes, but that place is so impractical now. It's just sitting there, unused." I felt my words erased, my memories reduced to a financial burden. I began to guard small things fiercely: the ceramic mug Henry gave me for our 20th anniversary, the lavender soap I bought for myself, the blue photo album from our first trip to Lakeview. I kept these items where I could see them, reminders that I still had ownership of my life. Looking back, those were not minor slights. They were rehearsals. Each small dismissal was a step toward the day they decided I no longer had the right to my own home, my own car, my own history. That June day did not announce itself as a disaster. Morning light slipped through the curtains, and I brewed tea in Henry's old kettle. I watered the fern, fed the neighbor's cat, and set the mail on the hall table. At 10:12 a.m., Mark arrived without calling. He moved with a purposeful stillness that always meant a request. Sheryl was behind him, sunglasses still on, a binder hugged to her chest. They did not sit. Mark set a manila envelope on the table and said, "Mom, we should finalize the cabin situation." "What situation?" I folded the dish towel along its seam. "The buyers are ready," Sheryl said. "It's a great price. Very generous, actually." Mark slid the papers toward me. Sale agreement, property, Lakeview cabin. Amount, $178,000. Buyer, Nathan and Eliza Harper. He glanced up. "I signed as your representative. It's all clean." My name sat on the last page, curved in blue, the way I sign birthday cards. Only I had not signed it. The date read June 14, 2024. The notary's stamp grinned like a coin. "I didn't agree to this," I said, and the room narrowed around the table edge. "You did," Sheryl replied quickly. She flipped to another page, tapping a paragraph. "Here's the power of attorney. Remember? You said we should handle your affairs. It's safer." I took the page. The font was familiar, the language was not. The signature looked like mine except for the G in Margaret, which looped up too confidently. I pictured my real signature on the credit union form, the way my hand hesitates before the curve. This one did not hesitate. Mark exhaled. "Mom, the cabin is a burden. Taxes. Maintenance. You never go." I saw the lake then, the dock Henry built from cedar boards he measured twice and cut once. I saw him untangling a line, the smell of gasoline from the old motor mixing with pine. "I go," I said. "I was there in April." "Exactly," Sheryl said. "In April. It's June. Things change." Mark pushed a pen toward me. "It's already done. The money is secured in the buyer's escrow. We'll transfer to your account today." I picked up the pen and set it down again. "You forged my name," I said, not as an accusation but as a measurement. Sheryl's smile tightened. "Don't be dramatic." Mark's voice softened. "Please. We're helping. You told us you get overwhelmed." I turned the notary page toward the light. The seal was crisp. The address below it belonged to a shipping store at the strip mall, Suite C, where they rent mailboxes. I knew because I'd mailed Kate a birthday package there. "I'm not overwhelmed," I said. He didn't look angry, only certain. "Sign," he said. "Let's do this like adults." The kettle ticked in the background, a mechanical heartbeat. Outside, a mower started. I thought of Henry's toolbox under the cabin bed, the wrench wrapped in an old shirt. I thought of the photograph in the drawer, us in raincoats, grinning. "I won't sign," I said. Sheryl opened her binder to a spreadsheet. "We already accepted the deposit. If you don't cooperate, you'll cause a legal mess." Mark leaned closer, lowering his voice as if to a child. Mom. Be reasonable. He reached for the papers, meaning to gather them, but my hand landed first. I felt the faint tooth of heavy stock. I pulled the documents toward me and saw another form tucked inside, a transfer authorization for my checking account, the one that receives my pension on the 25th. The account number was correct. The box next to electronic access was checked. I met Mark's eyes. Where did you get this? You sent it, he said. No, I said, steady now. I did not. He blinked. It doesn't matter. We're done here. He reached again. I did not let go. For a second we were both touching the same paper, the way we once both held a kite string on the beach. Sheryl's phone chimed. She glanced down. The Harpers want confirmation by noon. It's 10:34, I said. There's time to correct a mistake. Mark drew himself up. Mom, I'm trying to protect you. I closed the folder. From what? From yourself, he said. Something small and final clicked inside me, a latch finding its notch. I stood, gathered the envelope, and walked to the hallway desk. I placed the papers inside, turned the tiny brass key I keep on a blue ribbon, and slipped the key around my neck. When I returned, they were watching me as if I had stepped out of my assigned frame. This is not yours to sell, I said. He laughed once. We already sold it. Then you'll need to unsell it, I said. Sheryl drew a breath, ready to argue. I lifted a hand. Enough, I said. Leave the house. They stared, offended. Mark picked up his keys. You're making this hard, he said. I am making it clear, I answered. They left through the porch. The screen door sighed shut. The quiet that followed was not peace but a held note. I stood in it a moment, then reached for my phone. I scrolled to a number I had not used in years, the attorney who closed on our home. I pressed call. I expected my lawyer's voicemail, but he answered on the second ring. Margaret, he said. I explained what Mark and Sheryl had laid on my table. He listened, then said, come by at 2. Bring everything. And don't sign a thing. I set the phone down and opened the desk drawer. I laid the envelope flat and photographed each page with my old iPhone. June 14, 2024. $178,000. Power of attorney. Notary seal. I zoomed in on the G in my name and saw where the pen had hesitated, then shot upward into a loop that is not mine. Before I left, I made tea and steadied myself by tying a blue scarf, the one Henry bought at the harbor vendor when a wind came off the lake. The fabric's softness brought back the hiss of the water and the smell of pine soap. At 1:38 p.m. I logged into my banking app. My pension deposit on May 25th Saturday where it should. But another line below it, a linked device authorization on June 10th at 1912. New device, iPhone XR. Location, approximate 10 miles from home. I tapped more details. The last 4 digits of the approved number matched Mark's old phone. I scrolled my email. In my sent folder was a message to a title company with my name in the signature. I do not remember sending it. The subject line read, confirmation of seller's intent. The body authorized my son and his wife to manage communications. The timestamp showed June 11th at 8:03 from my kitchen IP address. I pictured Sheryl at my table pretending to text while I stirred oatmeal. I printed the email and the login record. Paper steadied the truth. In Henry's handwriting, still taped inside the desk, was the password hint he had once made for our joint savings after the cabin roof fund, where we first kissed. The answer had always been Lakeview. I changed the passwords to something new and wrote them on separate cards, sealing each in an envelope marked with today's date. At 2:06 I arrived at the attorney's office. The receptionist handed me a clipboard that felt heavier than it was. In the small conference room, the lawyer, Mr. Rosen, spread the pages like a map. He wore reading glasses low on his nose. "We'll take this one step at a time," he said. "Breathe." He traced the notary seal with a finger. "This is a common stamp sold through office suppliers. Not illegal, but the notary ID needs to correspond to a licensed individual." He typed the number into a database. "Here," he said, turning the screen toward me. "This ID belongs to a notary who resigned in April. Your document is dated June. So it's invalid," I said. "Likely fraudulent," he answered, careful with words. "Also, a power of attorney must be executed in strict form. If you did not sign this in front of a notary, it's void. Even if someone believes it, that doesn't make it lawful." He examined the transfer authorization. "This appears to be a photocopy of your bank's older form. See the footer? 2019, current forms use a QR code." He pointed to the account number. "Did you give them this?" "No." He nodded. "We'll notify the bank's fraud department to freeze third-party access. And we'll send a rescission letter to the buyers immediately, placing them on notice that title is disputed. That stops the train." The phrase loosened my shoulders. "Stops the train," I repeated. "Mr. Rosen drafted an email while I reviewed the cabin's deed he pulled from public records. Margaret Holloway and Henry Holloway, joint tenants with right of survivorship, recorded September 12, 1994. My finger found Henry's name and rested there. "We built that dock," I murmured. "I'm sorry," he said. "But you're not powerless." He printed the rescission letter and slid it to me. "Sign here." The pen felt honest in my hand. Before I left, he advised me to check my credit freezes and contact the county recorder to place a notice of pending action. "It's called a lease pendens," he said. "It tells the world there's a dispute." He dictated a simple affidavit. I did not grant authority to sell the cabin. Any signatures purporting to be mine are false. At home, I called the bank. A woman named Carla verified my identity by asking about my last 3 deposits and a $120 bookstore charge. "That's me," I said, and felt relief at owning even that small purchase. She confirmed an attempt to add an external account on June 12, rejected for mismatched tax ID. "We'll place an alert and remove all outside device permissions," she said. "Would you like new cards?" "Yes," I said. "And please note that my son does not have access." I said it plainly, and the words surprised me with their steadiness. That evening, I opened the blue photo album. Under a plastic sleeve, a receipt from the hardware store fell out: cedar boards, galvanized nails, a small brass key. Henry's scrawl, dock rails. I slid the receipt into a fresh envelope with the others. Evidence, I thought. Not for vengeance, for memory. For proof that a life was built board by board, and that it belongs to the one who built it. Mine to keep. The morning after visiting Mr. Rosen, I woke with a clarity I had not felt in years. For too long I had answered Mark's calls with hesitation, wondering what he might need. That day, I decided to stop reacting and begin acting. I brewed coffee, placed Henry's photograph beside my cup, and wrote a list in my notebook. The page filled with steady lines. 1. Sell house. 2. Sell car. 3. Secure apartment near Emily. 4. Close joint access. 5. Notify Mark in writing. The rhythm of the pen steadied me. At 9:15 I phoned a realtor whose flyer I had tucked away months ago. "Yes," I said when she answered, "I'd like to discuss selling my home." She scheduled a visit for Friday. I hung up, pressed my palm to the oak table, and whispered, "Henry, it's time." By noon, I contacted a dealership about my car. A man named Greg assured me they'd handle pickup and paperwork. I walked into the garage and touched the steering wheel, remembering Henry teaching Mark to drive in that car. The memory stung, but the decision felt right. At 1:42, I logged into the credit union site. Under Authorized Users, I saw Mark's name listed with limited privileges, added in 2022. My stomach turned. With 2 clicks, I revoked access. A confirmation code buzzed to my phone. I entered it with care, as though sealing a door. That evening, Emily called. "Mom? You sound different." "I made decisions today," I said. She was quiet a moment. "Tell me." "I'm selling the house. The car. I'm moving near you and Kate." Her breath caught. "Oh, Mom. Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "It's mine to decide." Her voice softened. "Then come. We'll help you find a place." After we hung up, I drafted a letter to Mark. Each sentence was deliberate. As of June 20th, I revoke any permission previously implied regarding my property, accounts, or decisions. You are not authorized to act on my behalf. I printed 2 copies, one for him, one for my records, and signed them in black ink. 2 days later, the realtor arrived. She walked through the rooms with brisk steps, noting square footage and natural light. "It will sell quickly," she said. I nodded, running a hand along the banister Henry once sanded smooth. The dealership collected the car that afternoon. I handed over the keys, the metal cool in my palm, then stood in the driveway as it disappeared down the street. For a moment, I felt hollow. Then lighter. That night, Mark called. His tone was clipped. "Mom, the Harpers are pressing. They want documents by tomorrow." "There are no documents," I said. "The sale is void. The power of attorney is fake." He paused. "Who told you that?" "My lawyer," I said. "And the bank?" A sharp inhale. "You went behind my back." "No," I replied. "You went behind mine." His voice rose. "You're making a mistake. You can't manage alone." "I can," I said. "And I will." I ended the call before he could answer. My hand shook slightly, but I felt a new strength. The next morning, a letter from Mr. Rosen arrived confirming the rescission notice had been sent to the Harpers. "They are legally bound to pause until ownership is resolved," it read. The language was dry, but to me it sounded like protection. By June 30th, the house had an offer. By July 3rd, my car sale was finalized. I signed a lease for a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus, walking distance from Emily's home. The unit overlooked a park where children flew kites. I stood on the balcony and felt the wind on my face. On July 5th, movers arrived. I watched them carry boxes marked books, kitchen, photos. Before leaving, I walked one last time through the house. The fridge hummed, the curtains shifted in the breeze, the hallway smelled faintly of lavender soap. I touched the front door with my fingertips, whispered goodbye, and closed it behind me. In Columbus, Emily and Kate met me with open arms. Kate placed a watercolor painting of a sunflower on my table. "For your new home, Grandma." I framed it immediately. That evening, sitting by the window with a cup of tea, I realized the choice was not about losing property. It was about reclaiming myself. The cabin, the house, the car, those were chapters. But the story was still mine to write. The call came 10 days after I moved into my apartment. Evening sun stretched across the living room floor, and Kate's sunflower painting glowed like a lantern on the wall. My phone buzzed. Mark's name appeared. I let it ring once, twice, before answering. His voice was thin. "Mom. We have a problem." I said nothing. The Harpers' lawyer sent a demand. "They want title by Friday, or they're suing me." "Then you'll have to explain why you sold what wasn't yours," I said. A hollow laugh. "You don't understand. I already spent the deposit. Sheryl said it was safe, so He stopped, then whispered, "They're threatening fraud charges." "Because you forged my name," I said evenly. He didn't deny it. Only silence. Then, "Mom, help me. Please." I thought of the day he brought tulips and told me I wasn't good with numbers. That was the first rehearsal for this moment. You need a lawyer, I said. I can't afford one. Everything's gone. Sheryl, his voice cracked. She left. Took the kids to her mother's. I closed my eyes. I remembered Sheryl in my bedroom drawer, her hand on my insurance papers. That small fracture had widened into this collapse. Mom, he said again. Don't let them ruin me. I breathed slowly. I didn't ruin you, Mark. You did that yourself. He cursed under his breath. You're cold. I'm clear, I answered. He hung up. The next week, I received a notice from the county recorder confirming my affidavit was filed. Any attempted transfer of the property known as Lakeview Cabin shall be subject to dispute. The language steadied me. The cabin was safe, at least for now. By August, news reached me through Emily. A friend of hers at the courthouse mentioned Mark's name on a docket, civil fraud, pending. Sheryl had filed for divorce. I felt no triumph, only a muted ache, as if watching a bridge I once walked collapse in the distance. In September, the Harpers' attorney called me directly. Mrs. Holloway, we recognize your position. We'll pursue damages against your son instead. I understand, I said. I'm sorry for your trouble. After the call, I walked to the park. Children flew kites, and the wind tugged at the strings. I sat on a bench and thought of the dock at Lakeview, the cedar boards under Henry's hands. That place was more than property, it was memory anchored in wood and water. They had tried to sell it, but they could not sell what it meant. Meanwhile, life in Columbus grew steady. I joined a watercolor class at the library, where the smell of paper and paint reminded me of my teaching days. I volunteered twice a week, shelving books, guiding children to the right aisle. One boy pointed at a copy of Treasure Island and asked, "Is it good?" I smiled. It's an adventure worth reading. At home, Kate visited daily. We baked muffins, painted, or simply sat together while she did homework. Her quiet presence was a balm. Emily often joined us for dinner. One evening, she said softly, "You seem lighter, Mom." "I am," I replied. "Because I chose." By October, Mark called again, this time from a new number. His voice was hoarse. "They froze my accounts. I'm in debt. No one will talk to me." "I'm talking to you," I said. "I mean no one will help," he muttered. "Not even you." "I can't undo what you forged," I said gently. He sighed. "I thought I was saving you." "Then next time, save yourself first," I answered. He said nothing more. The line clicked dead. That winter, snow fell heavy across the park. From my balcony, I watched children pull sleds. I wrapped myself in Henry's old scarf and felt, for the first time in years, safe. They had tried to sell my life for $178,000. But the true value was not in property, or signatures, or forged papers. The value was in the quiet mornings with tea, in the blue scarf, in the sunflower painting on my wall. I understood then, no one could sell what was mine to keep, my dignity, my voice, my freedom. On the first morning of spring, I took the blue scarf from its hook and walked to the small lake near my apartment. The tulip trees were just beginning to open, tight cups loosening into color. I sat on a bench with my thermos and watched the water crease and settle, the way a life does after a storm. I had promised myself I would visit Lakeview again, but I decided to wait until the court filings finished their slow crawl. Mr. Rosen said patience is also an action. In the meantime, I built a quiet, durable routine. Mondays and Thursdays at the library. Tuesdays for watercolor class. Saturdays for the farmer's market with Emily and Kate. We spoke in small, practical sentences. "Do you need lemons? Your blues are strong today. Grandma, look, the first robins." I kept evidence neatly labeled in a single file box: emails, photographs, the county notice, the bank's device log, the rescission letter. When anxiety stirred, I opened the lid, touched the papers, and remembered that truth keeps better when it is kept orderly. This, too, was a kind of strength. In March, the Harpers sent a final email. They had recovered their deposit from Mark and were withdrawing their claim against me. I read the message twice. Relief moved through me. I forwarded the note to Mr. Rosen and set my phone face down, letting quiet return to the table. Mark wrote once more. His message arrived at 11:04 p.m. I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. I don't expect forgiveness. I stared at the glow of the words in the dark. I did not reply that night, or the next morning. A week later, I sent a single line, repair begins with honesty. It was the most I could offer without setting fire to myself. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors with locks and chosen keys. I changed my will. I established a simple trust for Kate's education and left the cabin, explicitly, to Emily, with instructions that it be kept or sold only at her discretion and never under any power of attorney without my signature present. I wrote the date, April 12, 2025, in the margin and felt the pen's weight as a promise. When the legal dust settled, I drove to Lakeview with Emily. We arrived just after noon. The cabin smelled faintly of cedar and old coffee. Dust drifted in the light. I opened the window and heard the water answer the shore, a language I had almost forgotten. The dock was sturdy, boards silvered by weather. I ran my palm along the top rail and felt Henry there, his steadiness, his practical love. I did not cry. I stood and breathed. We made small repairs, tightened a hinge, oiled the locks, swept mouse nests from a corner. Emily found a brass key under the bed wrapped in a faded cloth. "Dad," she said, holding it up like a coin from a past you still spend. We hung the photo of Henry and me in raincoats beside the door. The frame leaned, and we straightened it, laughing. That night we ate sandwiches under a sky crowded with stars. Emily asked, "Do you think Mark will come back from this?" I watched the lake hold the starlight. "People come back when they choose the truth," I said. "Sometimes they don't choose." We let the crickets carry the conversation from there. In the morning, I took my notebook to the end of the dock. I wrote a list as simple as the first one. 1. Keep accounts private. 2. Review statements monthly. 3. Say no out loud. 4. Visit the cabin every season. The rules were not only about safety, they were about possession of my life. I slipped the page into a plastic sleeve and clipped it inside the pantry door, where it would greet me with the flour and sugar. Back in Columbus, the days unspooled with a kindness I had not expected. I painted lemons that looked like lemons. I read aloud to children who listened with the reverence reserved for pirates and talking spiders. I noticed the exact time the sunlight crossed the sunflower painting, 3:17 p.m., and let that small certainty anchor the room. I am telling this to you because silence would make it smaller, and smallness is what allowed it to happen. If my story touches a place you recognize, if someone has been speaking over you, rifling your drawers, naming their control as care, hear me, your voice is an instrument you are still allowed to play. You can say no without permission. You can choose the key you place around your neck. They tried to sell my life for pennies on a contract and a counterfeit seal. They did not understand that the true document is me, my consent, my memory, my hand on the pen. I do not hate my son. I do not excuse him. I stand in the space between those facts and choose what keeps me whole. If this touched a nerve, you belong here. Subscribe, leave a comment, and stay. I tell these truths because someone once told me I was not good with numbers, and I learned to count what matters. Today, I count mornings, paint water in a glass, and the soft knock of my granddaughter at the door. I count the weight of a brass key, and I count myself in. The year after everything unraveled settled into a different rhythm. My calendar no longer carried someone else's demands. It carried mine. Doctor's appointments, watercolor sessions, library shifts, dinners with Emily, afternoons with Kate. I began to write them in ink instead of pencil, as though declaring, "This is permanent, because I choose it." I bought a small oak desk for my apartment. It faced the window overlooking the park. The drawers held only what I allowed, paints, notebooks, carefully labeled files. Nothing slipped in without my knowledge. Order became its own comfort, a way of reminding myself that my life could be arranged by my own hand. Kate often perched on the chair beside me, swinging her legs. One day she asked, "Grandma, why do you keep writing lists?" "So I don't forget what matters," I said. "What matters?" I smiled. "You. Your mother. My mornings. My choices." She thought for a moment, then scribbled her own list on scrap paper. 1. Grandma's cookies. 2. Drawing birds. 3. Recess. I pinned it to the corkboard above the desk. It sits there still, proof that priorities can be as small and as large as we allow. In May, the library held a volunteer luncheon. They gave me a certificate, but what stayed with me was the boy I had guided to Treasure Island. He came up shyly, clutching the book. "I finished it," he said. His voice carried pride like a secret he couldn't keep. I shook his hand as though he were a scholar. Later, alone, I thought, this is repayment enough. By summer, my apartment began to feel not temporary but mine. I hung lace curtains, planted herbs in clay pots on the balcony, and placed Henry's photograph in a simple wooden frame. Every morning, the light caught the glass, and instead of grief I felt steadiness. His absence had shape, but it no longer hollowed me. Mark wrote twice more. The first was a short email, court date set. "I'll face it." The second, weeks later, arrived as a letter in his handwriting, edges smudged. "I'm working at a warehouse. I know I hurt you. I know I lost your trust. I hope someday I can earn even a little back." I read it 3 times. I placed it in the evidence box, not the drawer with Henry's letters. It belonged to the record, not to my heart. Maybe time will shift it. For now, boundary and memory must remain separate. One afternoon in August, Emily and I returned to the cabin with Kate. The air was warm, the lake calm. We grilled simple food, played cards on the porch, and watched the water turn gold at sunset. Kate asked to sleep in the loft. I tucked her in with an old quilt, the same one Henry once pulled over our shoulders when storms rattled the roof. Emily and I sat by the fire pit outside. She said quietly, "Do you regret selling the house?" "No," I answered. That house carried weight I didn't need anymore. This place, I gestured toward the cabin, carries memory, but not burden. It's light enough to keep. She nodded, understanding. The fire cracked, and for once the silence between us felt full, not empty. In October, I began attending a local book club. We met in a church basement, folding chairs in a circle, paperbacks dog-eared and worn. When it was my turn to speak about To the Lighthouse, I said, "It's about what remains after people leave, and how the house, or the sea, still carries them." A woman across the circle touched her chest, as if I had named something she had long felt but never spoken. That is the power of stories, they make loneliness audible. As winter approached again, I decorated my apartment with small, deliberate touches. A wreath on the door. Candles on the sill. Kate painted another sunflower, larger, brighter, and insisted I hang it next to the first. Together they looked like before and after, proof that healing is not replacement but growth. I sometimes think of that morning when Mark told me, we sold it all. At the time, it felt like a death. Now, I see it as a door. Painful, forced open without my consent, but leading me to a place where I could rebuild on my own terms. If you are listening to this and feel the press of someone else's control, know this: you are not too old, too quiet, or too late to choose differently. Change is not theft, it is reclamation. They tried to erase me with forged ink and false signatures. Instead, they wrote me into my own story again. And here I remain, painting, reading, walking the park, listening to Kate's laughter. My freedom is not loud, but it is steady. My dignity is not borrowed, but owned. The second winter in Columbus arrived softer than the first. By then, the apartment no longer felt new. It felt lived in. The kitchen drawers opened smoothly because I arranged them myself. The balcony pot sprouted thyme, rosemary, and a stubborn basil plant that clung to life even through frost. I had learned the rhythm of the park below, children in the mornings, joggers at dusk, the occasional violinist on Saturdays filling the air with something fragile and bright. I marked time in small ways. On the first of every month, I brewed strong tea, opened my notebook, and reviewed my accounts. I learned to scan statements the way I once graded essays, checking margins, catching errors. It became a ritual of reassurance. My money was where it should be, untouched, mine. That simple act rebuilt confidence Mark had tried to strip away. Letters from him arrived now and then. The handwriting was uneven, hurried. He wrote of warehouse shifts, of court dates postponed, of trying to visit his children under Sheryl's careful eye. He never asked for money again. Sometimes he apologized, repeating the words until they thinned. I replied only twice. My first note was factual: I am well. I hope you are finding your way. My second was briefer still: trust is built slowly. After that, silence felt truer than anything else I could send. Emily never pressed me to forgive or forget. She simply welcomed me into her daily life. We cooked together, sometimes using Henry's old recipes, his chili, his pancakes made lopsided but always delicious. Kate grew taller, her handwriting neater. She began painting her own stories, scenes of animals under skies filled with impossible colors. She told me once, "Grandma, you always make me feel safe." I realized then that safety is not the absence of danger, it is the presence of choice. At the library, I was asked to lead a short reading group for retirees. The first book we chose was Pride and Prejudice. I read aloud the opening line and felt the familiar weight of my teacher's voice return. The group laughed in recognition, some murmuring memories of reading it long ago. When one woman said, "I feel young again hearing this," I smiled quietly. Teaching had never left me, it had only been waiting. In spring, I returned to Lakeview alone. The cabin stood firm, the lake calm. I unlocked the door with the brass key Emily found months earlier. Inside, I dusted shelves, opened windows, and let air rush through. I sat on the dock with a sketchbook and drew the waterline, the pines, the reflection of clouds. My hand was unsteady, but the image was true enough. Henry's presence was not in the boards or the roof, it was in the act of caring for what we built. That summer, Emily and Kate stayed for a week. We played cards, swam, grilled vegetables, and listened to crickets at night. Kate asked, "Can we keep this forever?" Emily looked at me, uncertain, but I nodded. Yes. Forever is just another word for choosing again and again. By autumn, I felt something I had not in years: balance. Not perfection, not certainty, simply balance. My days contained work, rest, memory, and discovery in proportions I could live with. I stopped expecting life to repair what was lost. Instead, I honored what remained and built from there. Sometimes, alone in the evening, I lit a single candle. I would place the evidence box on the table, open it, and review the papers, not with fear, but with gratitude. Each document told the story of how close I came to losing everything, and how I refused. They reminded me that strength is not loud gestures but quiet procedures: a rescission letter, a revoked authorization, a notarized affidavit. Justice lives in the margins of paper as much as in the human heart. And now I tell my story here, to you. Because silence is where harm grows. Speaking it aloud turns harm into history, and history into warning. If you hear echoes of your own life in mine, if you have felt someone speak louder, check your receipts, invade your drawers, or sign in your name, let my voice be proof: you are not powerless. You may be weary, but you are not without tools. You can choose, even now. They tried to sell my memories for $178,000, reducing a life to figures on a page. But what they sold was only paper. What remained, my dignity, my family, my freedom, was never theirs to take. Now I rise each day with steady breath, a cup of tea warming my hands, and Kate's sunflowers bright on my wall. That is wealth. That is victory. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts, and stay close. Here we gather not in noise but in truth. Here, silence becomes strength, and strength becomes the life we deserve. Sometimes I sit by the window in the quiet and imagine my life as a bookshelf. Some volumes are worn, their spines bent from years of turning pages. Others are slim, barely touched. Mark's Betrayal is there too, a book I never wanted but cannot erase. Yet it stands only on one shelf, not the whole library. Most mornings now I wake to the scent of coffee and the sound of Kate's knock at the door. She tumbles in with her drawings, bright suns and impossible animals, and I realize, this is the chapter one choose to reread. I no longer ask why it happened, only how I endured. My answer is simple, I counted what remained. My voice. My choices. My dignity. They were enough. If you recognize yourself in these words, know this, you can build shelves of your own. And you can decide which books are worth keeping.